The wind screamed across the endless plains with the voice of a starving beast, tearing the last feeble warmth from a bleeding sky. It swept a cruel, indifferent whiteness over the entire world. This was a silence so deep it could crush a man's soul. Eli Beckett rode through the deepening freeze. His tired eyes scanned the blinding emptiness. His horse, Jupiter, moved with a weary determination, its breath pluming in the icy air like the last sighs of a dying fire. Home was a distant promise, but fate is a patient hunter. A strange, dark shape marred the pristine snow near the half-frozen creek. Not an animal. Something about the awful stillness screamed a different truth. A scrap of fabric lifted in the bitter wind. A dress. Every instinct told him to ride on. Trouble in the West was a seed that grew thorns, but a memory, old and painful, rose within him. His sister Sarah's face. He could not look away. He knelt in the snow. The crunch under his boots was the only sound in the universe. A young woman lay face down, her skin the color of forgotten frost. Her hair was a tangled web of ice. The heavy, soaked dress clung to her frail body like a burial shroud. He touched her shoulder, expecting the terrible stiffness of death. Her body yielded. A faint, ghostly breath escaped her cracked lips. She was alive. Barely. With a raw curse torn from his throat, Eli stripped off his thick sheepskin coat. The wind slapped his exposed skin, biting to the bone. He ignored it. He wrapped her in the last of his warmth. Lifting her was like lifting a broken bird. A small, pained moan escaped her as he settled her onto Jupiter. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated terror. He held her close against the punishing cold. He rode as if the devil himself gave chase. He did not stop until the golden glow of his cabin window pierced the endless dark. Inside, he laid her on his bed near the struggling fire. He pulled off her frozen boots. Her skin was like ice-slicked stone. His fingers moved to the small, icy buttons of her dress. Her eyes flew open, wide, wild, filled with a primal, consuming fear. Her hand shot out, gripping his wrist with a survivor's desperate strength. No. The word was a fragile thread, ready to snap. He froze. Why would a woman freezing to death fear a kindness? That look in her eyes. It was Sarah's look. Something deep inside him softened, then broke. He let her be. He swaddled her in dry blankets. He made broth over the fire, the simple smell of warmth filling the tiny room. He sat through the long, silent night, listening to the fragile rhythm of her breathing. A vigil for a stranger. For 3 days, she burned with fever. She cried out in the prison of her sleep, her small fists clutching the ugly, damp dress, as if it were her very soul. He never left her side. On the 4th day, the storm in her eyes cleared. She stared at him with a gaze the color of gathering clouds, heavy with unshed rain. He offered his name, his voice a low rumble of safety. He asked for hers. A long, silent moment stretched between them, taut as a wire. Clara. Nothing more. Weeks turned. Strength slowly returned to her limbs, but the dress never left her body. Even dry, it hung stiff and cold upon her frame, a suit of armor made of sorrow. Eli asked no questions. He built a sanctuary with quiet chores, chopping wood, tending the stove, the rhythmic sounds of a simple life. She moved through the cabin like a phantom, a silent shadow in the corners, flinching at the slam of a cupboard door. But he was patience itself, speaking in hushed tones, reminding her daily, hourly, that she was safe. He wasn't sure she believed him. One night, a scream shattered the silence. He found her curled tightly in a corner, her body racked with tremors, her eyes seeing monsters from another world. He approached slowly, a hand outstretched. She flinched violently, a wounded animal cornered. A whispered mantra spilled from her lips over and over. "Please don't take it off. Please don't take it off." The dress. The wretched, shapeless fabric. Eli stared at her, and a cold, certain knowledge settled in his gut. She wasn't just running from the winter. She was running from a man whose ownership was seared into her spirit. And somewhere out in the vast, unforgiving white, that man was looking. The new storm attacked the world with a furious howl. For 3 days, a swirling wall of white imprisoned them in the cabin. In that close, fire-lit world, the air between them began to shift. The silence was no longer empty, but filled with unspoken words. On the second day, he told a story. A silly tale about a stubborn bull. He told it plainly, without embellishment, but the image of him chasing the beast across the prairie, it made her smile. Then a laugh escaped her. A small, startled, beautiful sound. Eli stopped mid-sentence, his eyes wide with wonder. Clara covered her mouth, but the spell was broken. A wall of ice built over long, fearful weeks melted in an instant. That night she sewed by the firelight. He cleaned his rifle. The quiet was comfortable now, a shared peace. She found her. Courage in the gentle crackle of the flames. "Why are you alone, Eli?" The question hung in the warm air. He gazed into the fire, and a profound sadness settled over his features like a shroud. And he told her. He told her of Sarah, of a marriage that became a cage, of a town that chose to look away, of a river that took her, and the convenient, cowardly lie of an accident. His voice was not loud, but it vibrated with a lifetime of helpless rage. Clara listened, and something sharp broke open inside her own chest. She set her sewing aside. With slow, deliberate movements, she reached out. Her hand came to rest gently over his. It was the first touch she had ever initiated. He turned his hand over, enveloping hers. He held it as if it were the most precious, fragile thing he had ever touched. The storm outside raged, desperate to get in. But inside, they had built something new, something warm, something real. She awoke from a nightmare, the dress clutched in her fists, her face wet with silent tears. He knelt beside the bed, a silent sentinel in the dark. Her eyes found his, shimmering with vulnerability. "Please don't leave." He didn't. He sat beside her through the long night, guarding her sleep from the shadows. For the first time in a lifetime, she felt safe. Clara healed. Her hand still shook, but a new fire burned in her storm cloud eyes. Eli saw not the scars, but the formidable strength beneath them. Yet the dress remained, her constant, terrible companion. She slept in it. She washed it in secret. It was her prison and her shield. One afternoon, as she hung laundry by the hearth, the worn sleeve of her dress slipped back. Eli's breath caught in his throat, sharp as a knife. Bruises, old yellowing maps of pain, and fresh, livid marks in the unmistakable shape of fingers circling her wrist like a vile bracelet. His blood turned to ice, then to raging fire. Clara flinched, yanking the sleeve down, but the truth was exposed. He said nothing. The question hung between them, poisonous and thick. He held his fury, caging it for her sake. But the fever returned, not from illness, but from the memories that festered beneath the fabric. She trembled, whispering fragments of horror in her sleep. Please. Names. Screams that never quite left her throat. In the cold blue hour before dawn, Eli understood. It wasn't the dress she was protecting. It was the terrible secret it concealed. A truth so vile, she would rather die than reveal it. The snowstorm passed, leaving a brittle calm. They both felt it in the air, the coming of a different tempest, a storm made of men. And when it came, Eli would have to choose what kind of man he was. The world began to thaw with a slow, sighing breath. Clara grew stronger, her steps more sure, but the shadow in her eyes remained, forever watching the tree line. Then the fever took her again, fierce and sudden. The dress was soaked, a cold, damp prison feeding the fire in her veins. He tried to cool her, to soothe her. Her hand found his wrist, weak but desperate. Please don't take it off. He had promised, but she was dying before him. So, with a heart splitting in two, he broke his word. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice cracking with grief. This is the only way. His fingers worked the small buttons. She wept, too weak to fight, her tears a river of surrendered shame. He peeled the heavy fabric from her skin, and the world stopped. Her back was a landscape of atrocities, a cruel tapestry of old whip scars and fresh, brutal bruises, burn marks, sickening and precise. And there, seared into the very curve of her shoulder blade, a branded symbol, a jagged circle with the letter H carved within. Eli's hand trembled violently. What is that? Clara kept her eyes closed, a single tear tracing a path through the dirt on her cheek. A lifetime passed in the silence. It stands for hysteric. Her voice was dust and ashes. That's what he called me. And then, in the sacred, terrible quiet of the cabin, she told him everything. Her name was Annabelle Caldwell, a preacher's daughter from a town called Prosperity. She was promised to a man named Alistair Finch, a doctor with a handsome face and a hollow heart. He ran a hospital for women, a beautiful prison for the inconvenient, the outspoken, the unwanted. She had discovered his ledger, a chronicle of horrors and dead women. He smiled as he had her taken. She described the dark room, the smell of burnt metal and despair, the symphony of other women's suffering. She escaped in chaos and smoke, remembering only the cold and the hated dress he made her wear, marked forever as his property. Eli listened. A silent volcanic rage built within him, tempered only by the devastating weight of her truth. He wiped her tears not with pity, but with a profound, aching respect. He did not speak of vengeance. She had lived too long in its shadow. What she needed was a harbor. He would be that harbor. A fragile peace blossomed in the following days, a tender, quiet life built on shared looks and soft words. But fragile things are meant to be shattered. 2 weeks later, he saw the riders. 3 dark shapes moving with the arrogant certainty of men who believe they own everything they see. Clara's face paled, but she did not crumble. She met Eli's gaze, and her eyes held a steady, clear flame. They found me. Eli nodded slowly, his own expression hardening into granite. Then we'll meet them. She took the dress, not to wear it, to destroy it. They watched as the hated fabric blackened and curled in the fire pit, the symbol of her suffering turning to ash, carried away on the wind. The next morning she stood beside him on the porch. She wore his clothes, Her hair was tied back from a face that was calm, resolute, and fiercely alive. Her fear had been forged into steel. The man in the middle dismounted. Alistair Finch. His gaze slid over Eli with dismissive contempt. It settled on Clara with the cold possession of a man reclaiming lost livestock. Annabelle. His voice was smooth, chilling. Let's go home. Clara raised her chin, the morning light catching in her fierce eyes. My name is Clara. Her voice did not waver. And I am not going anywhere. The world exploded into violence. The crack of Eli's rifle split the calm. One of Finch's men fell. A shot whined past Eli's ear. Another grazed his arm with a hot sting. Then Clara fired, steady, purposeful. The man who had held her down crumpled into the snow. Finch turned to flee, his pride dissolving into cowardice. Clara chased him, a vengeful spirit across the white. She cornered him at the frozen creek. He begged. He lied. He lunged, and Eli was there. A single, final shot echoed through the trees. A period at the end of a long, terrible sentence. Clara stood over the still form of Alistair Finch. Snowflakes began to settle softly on his coat. She did not smile in triumph. She simply breathed, deep, shaking, liberating breaths, as if she were breathing for the very first time. They burned the past that night, a pyre that lit the sky with an orange glow, the air sweet with the smell of release. Spring arrived, gentle and green. Laughter returned to Clara, a sound as natural now as the birdsong. She walked beside Eli into town, her head held high. Whispers followed, but they could not touch her. She heard the old hateful word once, carried on a brittle breath. Hysteric. And she smiled, a small private smile, because she knew its true meaning now. It meant unbroken. It meant free. Weeks later, on a sun-drenched hillside, she stood in a dress of her own making, the color of a forgiving sky. She had planted flowers by Sarah Beckett's grave, weaving a thread of peace into a tapestry of old pain. Eli came to her, his hand finding hers with a gentle certainty. You're safe, he said, the words a vow. She looked out at the wide-open valley, the sunlight warming her face, the ghost of the brand on her shoulder finally fading. I'm free. And finally, with every fiber of her being, she believed it. She turned to him, her eyes clear, her voice full of a future she never dared dream. I'm ready to live, Eli. Not to hide, not to run, to live. Eli leaned down, pressing a kiss to her forehead, a seal upon their new beginning. Then let's live.